This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And it is on and popping. NBA Finals action. We are fully into it. Boston Celtics, Dallas Mavericks. And, you know, there's really nothing to sugarcoat here, man. These are two really talented teams, and the focus is going to be on whether or not the Boston Celtics have enough. Can the Dallas Mavericks overcome a deficit against a really talented basketball team? Probably the greatest test that they've ran against so far in their playoff run. You know what I'm saying? And so it's just really a lot of great things. But one of the things I enjoy about doing this show more than anything is when I'm doing it with my right-hand man, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my man, Mr. Warren Shaw. We've been doing plenty of NBA Finals conversations, discussions, doing them from so many different angles and perspectives. And Shaw, I think what I know our focus is going to be is on the things that I think the typical or the very, surface invested fan is going to lean on the fact that it's a 2-0 lead and, you should be good. You got the advantage and things of that nature. No. We breaks it down. You know what I'm saying? Breaks it down to the elements on the good, the bad, the ugly for both teams respectively, and why it comes back to the kind of predictions that we made with regards to who we thought was going to wind up winning this NBA Finals. And so far, these first two games are indicative of why that conversation needs to be had.
Yeah, I mean, Boston Celtics and the Dallas Mavericks are a very good matchup. And while game one did not provide all the theatrics, except for maybe a brief run in the third quarter by Dallas, game two was indicative of what we thought we would see kind of throughout. Dallas is a very game opponent. Boston is a very streaky elite level contender as well, which gives people pause. And this is why, a lot of people, while I think it was a little hasty to pick Dallas in 5, I figured this would be a long series no matter what. Like I saw a lot of ESPN folks kind of going that way because they're right in the hot hand of Luka and Kyrie, but these teams are kind of evenly matched. And, as we said in our finals preview, Dallas has the two best offensive players in the series, but one of those players has not played like that up in the first two games. So this has been something that is both teams feel like they can figure this out, can play better than they've showed. If you're Boston, you probably feel better because you haven't played your best basketball. But Dallas knows, hey, we haven't played our best basketball, and Kyrie has yet to actually enter the chat, as you say, into this series. And you would figure, without getting too much into the analysis, down 2-0, going home, you have to win game 3 if you're Dallas. All those guys who've been struggling so far here on the road in Boston, you figure they will get a boost from that, what will be a raucous Dallas crowd, because they also know what's at stake for them as well, too. So it'll be interesting to see how those guys respond in game 3. But we're not there just yet. We got to finish breaking down game 2.
Yeah, absolutely. So if people are paying attention, the Boston Celtics have taken a 2-0 lead over the Dallas Mavericks. And as we're recording this podcast, the Boston Celtics took game 2, 105-98. So, Shaw, one of the things that I think really, kind of sticks out at me, and it's the whole paralysis by analysis. I want people for a moment, if you were paying attention to this game, and you mentioned something a little bit earlier about the fact that, it didn't really drive a lot of storylines in game 1 because of, the run that the Boston Celtics had. But this, to me, is exactly why people were paying attention to why this was going to be such a great matchup, because both of these teams are capable of runs. The difference is the Dallas Mavericks just didn't have their run. But this is what you're supposed to have with elite defenses. And I hearken this back to, I know I sound like, a broken record about this. I texted you about this before we jumped on this podcast, Shaw. I said, this is going to come down to the Boston Celtics defense, not their offense. If the Boston Celtics play the kind of defense that we've been seeing them play for the first 2 games of this series, I don't give a damn what anybody wants to tell me about how great Kyrie Irving is. Kyrie Irving is not getting around that kind of wall. Kyrie Irving does not have the kind of bandwidth and energy for him to be able to figure out how to outmaneuver four all-star level defenders on the court at the same time. It is going to require more than Luka Dončić, and it's going to require more than PJ Washington and Jason Kidd, for that matter, if the Boston Celtics play to the level of defense that they are capable of playing. This is not something that just came out of the blue, Shaw. This is years of defensive prowess when you talk about Jrue Holiday, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, and Jayson Tatum. And like you said before, when Jayson Tatum enters the chat defensively, this is what will get the Boston Celtics to an NBA championship. This is not how the Dallas Mavericks are going to win the championship. It won't be because of their defense. It'll be because of their offense. If they can offensively figure out a way to break down a very daunting gauntlet of defenders that the Celtics can throw at the Dallas Mavericks will hoist this trophy. Make no bones about it.
Yeah, I think what's happening with Kyrie specifically, as you alluded to, he is seeing the wall, and then guys aren't giving him angles in essence to be able to pass out of. So he's taken a couple of very contested shots, 7 of 18 here in game 2, and just doesn't look comfortable, right? And I don't think the Boston crowd, as foolish as I think they have been in essence to try to say, oh, we'll boo louder. That's not what's impacting him. It is the defense, it is the length, but guys got to move. And they got to give him some better passing angles. And they also got to put Kyrie and getting him going downhill as to not have him consistently having to go one-on-one against Boston help because they're comfortable switching. You even saw Porzingis on Kyrie for, a few possessions. And, hey, 7-3, as shifty and as fast as Kyrie is, Porzingis can make up some of that just by sheer virtue of his length, his height. He can close that space, even if he's not, attached at the hip, I think, defensively. But for me, it is going to be about what Jason Kidd does to get other guys kind of in motion. They had some success, Dallas did, with Gafford post-ups, and let's not go crazy. We're not going to throw the ball down to Gafford, 25 times a game, but they found a little bit of success with that. And then, having Tatum, hey, he's just not strong enough. So I think they do have to mix things up. Their bench has been pretty porous. Derek Lively has not had much of an impact in this series. It'd have a pretty, lively dunk, no pun intended, in the third quarter. But outside of that, their bench has been pretty porous as well. So I expect all of that to change when you get back into Dallas. But Kyrie specifically has got to be the guy who can be, at least 48% shooter. He can't be what we're seeing here right now and getting into the 20 to 25 point per game range to help Luka Dončić.
Shaw, we'll get into the Boston Celtics in a little bit, but I want to stick to what we've been talking about with the Dallas Mavericks. And you brought up a pretty interesting point about the difficulties that Kyrie Irving is having with the looks that he's trying to get and try to give himself, not just in the half court set, but even in transition against the Boston Celtics. I'm going to say something. You can tell me if I'm like off the rocker, if I'm crazy. Right now, what we're seeing from Luka Dončić, yes, is very impressive. But what I'm also seeing from Luka Dončić is very dangerous as well, too. Luka Dončić is airing into a very interesting space, so to speak, because while the numbers present themselves about how dominant he could really be, it's at the detriment of what he really needs to give the rest of his team and the Dallas Mavericks the best opportunity and chances to win. So hear me out on this. A lot of that difficulty that you're talking about regarding Kyrie Irving, Shaw, really happens because Luka Dončić, his pace of getting the ball to move, his pace of controlling is taking Kyrie Irving out of what's necessary against the Boston Celtics. It wasn't necessary against the Minnesota Timberwolves. It wasn't necessary when they were playing against the against the LA Clippers,
The Clippers and the Thunder.
and the Thunder, right? Those are two teams that, because they wanted to primarily stay with one defender, made it much easier for Kyrie Irving's movements to be able to operate within space. He can dictate and open up space better for himself. I'm gonna harken back to what kind of Kyrie Irving the Dallas Mavericks are gonna need for them to be able to pull off this run to get the chip. It's gonna have to be similar to the type of pace that Kyrie had paired up with LeBron James. Luka Dončić, unfortunately, doesn't carry that kind of freaky speed, but he can pick the pace up a little bit. He can dictate and demand a lot more than what you're currently seeing. But what happens is when you're playing from behind and you're playing against a downhill team like the Boston Celtics, who, when they're hitting their shots, again, to your point, the Celtic avalanche, so to speak, becomes an overwhelming task where it forces you not have to play out of, what you would typically want to dictate and want to do. But I'm telling you right now, if you're going to ask me the only way to be able to open up Kyrie Irving has to make his decisions a lot faster at the top and go downhill without favor, or fear. Because the moment there's a pullback, the moment that the ball hangs around the top of the three key, the Celtics as defenders are creating those walls that you're saying that limits that spacing that Kyrie Irving loves to operate in. Because even when you see him getting trapped, you're seeing the headiness of guys like Jrue Holiday and the headiness of Jaylen Brown cornering him, where he's literally have to going baseline out of bounds to come inbounds for him to take shots. That's not how Kyrie Irving wants to operate, especially if he's trying to do a fadeaway. He wants to operate where he's forcing whoever is in front of him to make a mistake that he can go in and around, but with space.
Yeah, well, I mean, and he still had 6 assists, so I don't want to say like they stopped him there. But again, it's the shots he was unable to make, and Boston's doing a great job, I think, of stunting, and then continuing to showing him different defenders as we've been alluding to, but also stunting and hedging back, and again, not making those angles very easy for him specifically. And we've said going into the series, if Luka and Kyrie have to do truly most of the heavy lifting. And by that, I mean like most of the scoring, so to speak. They need to spread it around a little bit. That's a little bit how they were successful in essence in getting here. PJ Washington had a good game here in game 2. So he got up to 17 and shot 6 of 13. I thought he did a nice job getting into the lane and hitting some floaters and things like that, some mid-range shots. Derrick Jones Jr., he shot over 50%, right? So he didn't have a bad game. But ultimately, I think it's the overall dynamic aspect of the Mavericks offense that we're not really seeing here. But credit Luka. Even like swinging into him a little bit. 1 assist in game 1, got up to 11 here today. So he figured out some things. Boston did a little bit more doubling, and he made them pay every single time that they did that, which is why you really don't, you kind of have to live with whatever medicine you're willing to put out there in terms of one-on-one.
Understand that. I didn't even, if I had to say there was that one flaw with what the Boston Celtics did, it to me was the lack of necessity to double team. There we go. I didn't want to throw another word in there, but go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think where again, Dallas is, and Jason Kidd specifically, they have ways in essence to make this better and to get both of those guys better looks, but it's not just them, as we continue to allude to. So we did not see Tim Hardaway Jr. in this game, which we saw him in game 1, right? We saw Dante Exum, get off the bench here and play a couple minutes or whatever the case would be. And I don't know if that's not a key to the series per se, but somebody off that Dallas bench has got to be able to provide, and whether that be spacing, whether that be energy, getting into the teeth of the Celtics off defense. That's where they're going to need truly a third guy. And, I think what we saw PJ Washington was that guy in the OKC series. So will he come back to life, especially with the 17-point performance here, and be a guy who can truly be another outlet for them when they get back to Dallas. But Kidd, he's got some stuff to figure out here too. And, before we transition to the Boston side, maybe they're fine, living with the way the Celtics are shooting the 3 ball right now. As bad as Boston was, and they were plus 27 on the 3 in game 1, ended up being, I think, plus 12 here in game 2. Boston was atrocious from open looks. And so they hit a couple of wild ones. Again, the Pritchard one, Derek White, I think, hit 2 threes, with the shot clock winding down, or he just forced to, kind of have to take a shot. He made 4 threes, but 2 of them, you can kind of say were almost BS. I would be concerned if I'm Dallas about that. In the aspect is like, all right, do you just feel like they're not going to be this good? Because a lot of those looks were wide open. And traditionally, while I don't think the Celtics are knockdown shooters, open looks they can usually hit. So that's where Dallas is going to have to tighten up that defense. And it's a shame for them because this was a winnable game. They missed a lot of free throws in addition to shooting poorly from 3 themselves, and they turned the ball over more. So I think those are things that they think they can clean up going into game 3. But it's a tough situation for Dallas, but hope is not lost because I think you can look at Boston and feel like, all right, we can play with these guys. But on the other hand, I think Boston doesn't feel like they've played their best game yet either.
Absolutely. Look, the Dallas Mavericks also, and I may have mentioned this earlier before if I didn't, but the Dallas Mavericks turned the ball over 15 times. Okay. You just cannot.
They had 8 of them.
You can't do that against, one of the best defensive teams in the NBA and not pay for it. And if you're going to ask me, I think that's one of the keys as to why the Boston Celtics wound up winning is they got key turnovers. They won the turnover battle because the Boston Celtics are prone to turn the basketball over, but they just didn't make theirs hurt as much as the Dallas Mavericks did. So, and there's other key elements that we'll get into when we talk about the Boston Celtics. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA as we are giving our NBA Finals discussion overview, games 1 and 2, and what the expectations are going on for game 3's coming up. We'll be talking a little bit about the Boston Celtics, what they did right, what they did wrong, what should they be doing differently to get themselves in the best position possible to take a dominant and hopefully a prominent lead in this year's NBA Finals. But first, are you ready to elevate your fantasy sports experience with Prize Picks? You can win up to 100 times your money during the most thrilling time of the year of the basketball season. Imagine turning a $10 entry into a whopping $1,000. The summer is full of sports, and there's no better time to get in on the action. Prize Picks is all about variety and excitement. Whether you're a fan of basketball, hockey, or even League of Legends, Prize Picks has you covered. You can mix and match your picks across sports like Jayson Tatum for more than 10 rebounds, Luka Dončić for more than 29 points, Caitlin Clark for more than 3.5 3-pointers made, and Breanna Stewart for more than 23 points. Sean and I grew up playing baseball, so we like to mix in a little variety with America's pastime. And for those of you who love a quick win, Prize Picks is the way to go. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. Plus, with quick withdrawals and an enormous selection of players and stat types, it's no wonder Prize Picks is the go-to app for fantasy sports. So what are you waiting for? Download the Prize Picks app today and use the promo code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's right. Prize Picks will match your deposit, giving you more to play with. Remember, with Prize Picks, it's as easy as picking more, picking less. So let's get those entries in and watch the winnings roll. It's that easy. Don't forget to use the promo code CLNS to get your deposit match. And stay tuned for more basketball insights right here on the Baseline NBA podcast. Let's play and win together with fun and Prize Picks. More Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw. Don't go away. We're back. Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast, in our conversation of the NBA Finals. Boston Celtics taking a 2-0 lead against the Dallas Mavericks in this best-of-7 series. So we discussed the Dallas Mavericks, Shaw, the keys of what's working for them, what's not working for them. what kind of adjustments need to be made. Let's talk about the Boston Celtics. And you alluded to this, Shaw. You know, game one, we've seen literally, you know, kind of a small glimpse of what a team in their rhythm can truly look like. If you're talking about the Boston Celtics hitting their threes. Game two, to me, is a reminder of why I think a lot of people believe that the Boston Celtics arguably are the best team in the NBA, because other teams who probably operate with the style of offense that the Boston Celtics do don't have a plan B, don't have a plan C, don't have the ability to out execute the opposing team if their plan A is not working. And the Boston Celtics figured out a way when plan A of them hitting threes was not working for them to take this 2-0 series lead against the Dallas Mavericks. And while I think there's some really good things to take away from that idea, there are certain things that I know was concerning you after watching this particular game, especially and more notably, Kristaps Porzingis not being able to finish the game, and him leaving early in the third quarter, I believe, or was it the fourth?
It was in the fourth. It was in the fourth quarter. But no, Porzingis was a plus 12. In this game in a whopping 23 minutes. So I think Joe would mitigate most of Dallas's runs with a timeout and entering Porzingis in. I saw it happen, on multiple occasions throughout the game. So with Porzingis, what seems to be nursing his calf, and Joe Mazzulla said he's fine, zero issues there. We'll see. Well, what happens in game three.
We gonna call cap on that? We gonna call cap on Joe?
I mean, he's not going to give the Mavericks anything, especially with 2 days before game three going up. Like, he wants them to be on their heels, if you will.
And that's the unfortunate part about this situation. Like, man, you wish that this was something that happened, game one, because then it would give him that extra day. Now we're operating on basically almost an every other day scenario, so to speak. Even though it's 2 days, it's still a shortened amount of time and indifferent to the timing from games 1 and 2 that the Celtics were given. So,
yeah, well, I mean, that's the proverbial West Coast trip or swing. Dallas is not that far away, in the middle of the US, if you will. So,
right.
But still, they still get the 2 days. And yeah, the treatment is going to have to be serious. Now, I think when you talk about the unfortunate side, the comforts of home, do mean a lot. And I think the fact that Porzingis has to now take his treatment on the road could be to some semblance of a disadvantage, I think, for Boston and whatever it is. But again, take Joe at his word. He's fine. No worries for game three. I think that's being optimistic or gamesmanship, I think, at best right now. But ultimately, Boston, they really struggled, generating looks if and when Dallas was engaged. And so that concerns me, a great deal. But again, as I said before, they were able to get some open looks on the three ball, but we've seen situations with them this year where they have shot like this 25% shooting from three, where they're jacking up. And that's when it is. When you're not making them, then it is. You're jacking them up, 40 and 45 attempts a game. That's really tough. But to their credit, Jrue Holiday was able to save the day. 11 of 14 from the floor. He did a lot of stuff, I think, diving in from the perimeter, delayed cuts and staggered screens. And then Jayson Tatum, to his credit as well, too, would find him late. And we've seen Tatum be able to do some things with his play creation in these playoffs. Think back into the series against Cleveland, in that magical game Al Horford had, running the pick and roll there. And then he was like, popping out and, making behind the back passes. His timing and his chemistry with the other guys on this team, that is improving. And I think that's where Tatum does deserve some credit, despite his poor shooting throughout the course of the series. But, Boston needs to stay in attack mode. They're shooting. They shot an amazing percentage from the free throw line tonight, 19 of 20. And if they can continue to do that, they can neutralize Gafford and Lively when those guys are out there and continue to generate open looks. And they just got to make those threes. But more importantly, they got to continue to attack and get into the teeth of the defense, which they did some tonight, 46 paint points.
All right. So a couple of things. They were 19 of 20. you can make the argument that they could have been at the free throw line over 30 times tonight. Okay. They really could. If the mindset is to attack. So it's interesting how you say, the Celtics, continue to attack. So what does that mean? I'm not saying it to be facetious to you or, to be, snarky or sarcastic to you, because that to me is what befuddles me more than anything. When we talk about teams that should attack, are we saying attack with their style of offense, because their style of offense is for them to shoot the three? And I think if you're the Boston Celtics, I think there are times where, while yes, that is your bread and butter, that is what got you to here, and I'm not saying that you should not be doing it. But what I am saying is that you have to have a healthy appetite of showing the propensity of being a downhill basketball team. And when your three ball just isn't landing for you, you should be that much more aggressive, especially when the defense that you're playing against is giving you the lanes. They are gifting you the lanes. And the lack of downhill attacking, I think, does a disservice, because you rely so much on the fact that you can shoot that three whenever you feel like it or whenever it's presented to you.
Well, so I would challenge the notion in this regard. It's hard to pick on this team. They won 64 games. They're up 2-0 here in the NBA Finals. So I think it's like, I don't want to be like the rest of mainstream media, because we're not happy with the style points Boston has. So let's just have the conversation really quickly. When you talk about attacking, how do you mean? Because I look at this Boston team. While I like Jayson Tatum, I like Jaylen Brown. They are physically gifted. They are not the best initiators of offense dribbling the basketball. They make me god awful nervous every time they put the ball on the floor.
Absolutely.
Jrue Holiday, solid, but he's not blowing by guys. Derek White, solid, not blowing by guys. So they don't have a way to truly dribble, penetrate in the way that most attacking offenses would typically do.
Right. Okay. So to answer your point, and I'm going to try to be as succinct as I possibly can about this. It is not a question of Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown and what they're doing. It's the decision making that they are, I guess, landing on as they're doing it. In other words, I feel like I see more times than not, they go in with the intent to look for the late kick out, or they look for the outlet, rather than just outright going right up again into the chest hairs of the Dallas Mavericks. Now, I am not saying you got to do that every single time, but what I'm saying, Shaw, is so many times already through the course of this series, especially when the Dallas Mavericks are making their runs, part of those critical turnovers that the Boston Celtics make is because they do too much dancing instead of actually executing on the play itself. If you've gotten that far, see it through, even if the other team blocks it. I'm just saying, to me, I think, and you see this, part of the struggles with Tatum is he is looking to outlet, and then his selection of shot is not interior in the paint. It's, fade away this, or, back out and step back this. I'm like, bro, you're already in the paint. You're right there. And listen, I was happy with some of the shots that he missed tonight. I know a lot of people looking at he's struggling at offensively. So some of the shots that he took were some difficult shots, but they were the kind of shots that sucked the defense down so low that it gave opportunity for those open threes that the Celtics were missing. And I can live with that. What I can't live with is the dancing around, and then you make like this heavy decision on the pass, and it goes nowhere.
Part of it is because, like I said, them dancing around is usually ineffective. So they're not break your man down type guys. Every now and then they'll get by somebody, but they're not, these master creators, I think, off the bounce. And I like what you said in terms of Tatum. He got to the couple of times. So you like the aggressiveness there. I think Gafford blocked him once. He missed a driving layup. But sometimes it's a matter of, can you get guys going, kind of off the catch. But the difference when I say that for Boston and versus Dallas is that they don't have the same body control like that a Kyrie does, where they can truly adjust to the defense kind of midair. So for me, when I say attack for them, it's a lot of what we saw Jrue Holiday doing tonight, but it is passing and it's moving the ball and body movement. It's not, let's say I need to, cross you up and then drive by you. And it's like, all right, can I do a delayed screen? A dribble handoff, get a guy in motion, have somebody cut now from the weak side corner. You know what I mean? Maybe create a passing angle, maybe even a lob. And that's, to me, if there was like a 3-minute stretch, I believe it was in the third quarter, Dallas made their run to like start the third quarter, took the lead. Mazzulla calls a timeout. And I believe that's when he inserted Porzingis immediately. Boston's dynamic offensively was immediately different, because even Porzingis, he's just more mobile than Al is as well too. So as crazy as that may even seem to sound, but he was, he would be on the baseline corner three, came up to the free throw line and started took an angle and then went to the weak side baseline, or whatever the case may be. Jrue Holiday was able to, give a touch pass to him. He took a mid-range jumper and was able to hit that. It's just that level of movement. You wish they would do that on a more regular and consistent basis, because it then can continue to generate threes, because the defense has to be honest. It's like, oh shit, they're going to attack us from all angles. And then you really can't leave certain guys open. But that said, somehow, some way, this team is still up 2-0 in the NBA Finals after shooting 26% from the three-point line this evening. Jaylen Brown, 6 turnovers in this game. Jayson Tatum shot 6 of 22 in this game, and they're still up 2-0. So it's a credit to Boston's overall team dynamic, and what you said in the very outset of what we were talking about, their ability to defend on the other side of the basketball at an extremely high level to make things tight. While I didn't love all of Derek White's shots tonight, he still finished 4 of 10 from the three-point line. Like I said, 2 of those seemed to be, luck, but he missed some open ones. But what he did defensively, especially that chase down block on PJ Washington, was it 3 blocks, 2 steals, or 2 steals, 3 blocks? Derek White does all the intangibles for this Boston team.
I personally believe that was a game changer.
There's no doubt.
I'm not saying, let's just put it like this. My degree of confidence of the Celtics winning that game, hadn't Derek White missed it, would have went from a 7 to a 3, because those kind of runs, those type of key baskets at certain points, especially when you've got closers like Luka and Irving who are chomping at the bit to be in this situation. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And I think, to me, Shaw, I think this is going to be the key for games 3 and 4 on the road for the Boston Celtics. They have to assume that the Dallas Mavericks are going to give their best punch in game 3. They cannot allow the Dallas Mavericks to upend this series by taking a big L. When I say big L, I'm talking like a 20-point blowout loss. You know what I'm saying? Unless, like, what we're saying is like what happened to them when the Celtics played the Miami Heat, or they played the Cleveland Cavaliers, and just everything in God's name is just landing for them. And this is indicative of the Celtics just not being able to just stop the avalanche themselves. To say that they will replicate that is a little far-fetched. But if the Dallas Mavericks are doing what they've already been doing for games 1 and 2 with some minor tweaks and adjustments, and it upends this being like a 25-point blowout loss, I'll become concerned, because what it's telling me now is the one thing that the Celtics have that's ironclad, that is the lock and key for them to win this thing, the Dallas Mavericks have suddenly exposed. And now we're putting it back on Joe Mazzulla to figure out a way to make adjustments again to put the Celtics back in position to take control of that series. I'm not saying that I want the Celtics to win, obviously, game 3. But I'll just be as happy that the Celtics lose a tight one to the Dallas Mavericks, and the Mavericks win because they have to win through Luka and Kyrie Irving magic, than I would rather see the Celtics getting the doors blown off of them on the road, because offensively the Mavericks figured out a way to stymie the Boston Celtics defense, if what I'm saying makes sense.
Well, I mean, it does. I mean, I think I would disagree in the aspect of, like, you can, in theory, explain away a hot team who just, has historic shooting, especially truly the series is on the line for them. They can't go down 0-3. They get home on the road. If Dallas were to come out and, shoot the lights out and win that game, Boston can be like, all right, you can throw that away. If it's a close game with Luka and Kyrie down the stretch, that means you had your chances to win. And then that means you weren't able to execute in certain aspects. And I think that's the biggest thing. They don't want to have to be in a, all right, now let's really see who is the best player in the series type of situation with those two guys, because it's advantage Dallas, in clutch situations. There's not a person in this world who doesn't think Luka and Kyrie would have the advantage in last second shots versus Tatum and Brown. It's advantage Dallas 100 times out of 100. So for me, whatever happens in games 3, if Boston were to go down, if I'm the Celtics, while I understand like you don't want to get blown out, but you could probably better explain like, hey, we didn't play well and they were extremely hot, versus like, oh man, we lost our chances. And then now it came down to the clutch and Luka and Kyrie beat us. So two different philosophies that we have, I think, on this, moving forward. But, we will see what ends up happening there and what both Mazzulla and Jason Kidd ultimately decide to do, with their lineups, and obviously the health of Kristaps Porzingis, going into this. One final thing, or, two final things for me in terms from the Boston side. I think I'm hoping against hope that this bench is going to turn it around. And I know I touched on it a little bit earlier. It's Porzingis or bust. Hauser and Pritchard, like they'll come in here and get a couple minutes, 10 and 12 respectively this evening. Again, Pritchard's 3 was immense, because it was a momentum shift to end the third quarter. But it doesn't seem like a series where they're going to be able to really have much of an impact. And no matter what happens, this Boston team is going to have to address this, especially if, Porzingis and Al, Porzingis is injury prone and Al is just, older and getting very long in the tooth here. Something's going to have to give, in essence, to give the Boston bench some depth, but that's nothing they can do right now in this series, unless you think Luke Cornett, O'Shea Brissett, or Svi Mykhailiuk can help you in some ways, or Xavier Tillman. I don't know that those guys can.
I'm saying, why you got to say it and be laughing? It's just
let's call a spade a spade, So while advantage Porzingis if he's healthy, I take Porzingis over anybody Dallas has on their bench currently. But there's more waves of guys in essence that I think Jason Kidd is willing to try. And while we didn't see Tim Hardaway in this one, he might get a shot again here in game 3. Josh Green hasn't been that effective. Kleber's still coming off of the injury himself as well too. So if either of those guys kind of get going, for Dallas, it's a different series. So game 3 is going to tell us a lot about the future of this NBA Finals.
I would probably say, yeah, I completely agree with you if I thought that the focal point was more about the front court play for both of these teams. I really just think that what it comes down to are energy guys. And until the energy guys for the Dallas Mavericks really put their mark on this series, I can live with the idea that Joe Mazzulla, can run Hauser and Peyton Pritchard out there, because ultimately what I want those guys to do is to just be out there and just really be a presence. Now, I know for you, Shaw, part of that is what they do offensively, because they're not going to give you anything defensively. But again, I just really think it's to me, I think when you utilize players, I kind of use this type of analogy from a sports perspective, and this will be my final point on this. Because I think it's important for people to take a look at what's going to take place over the next couple of games in this series. But I look at this as saying, let's just say that you have a team, right? And the team that you're playing with, a lot of the guys are new on the team. They're not used to playing with you. They probably don't even know how to play the game that you're playing, right? The only way that you're going to know what positions they can play, what role they can, they can contribute. What you got to run them out there. You got to play them. And listen, you have to be confident in figuring out a way to make them useful for the overall, scheme, like for what the overall goal needs to be.
Sure.
I'm not saying you force feed it, but what I'm saying is you can't just now snub the idea that you can't figure out a way to get those guys out there, especially when you need to buy time. And I think that's what it comes down to. And right now, if you're Joe Mazzulla and you're the Boston Celtics, and what got you here is your team's depth, you don't suddenly shorten that just simply because you're so desperate about wanting to take advantage of some of the matchups that are taking place. Yeah. You know what I mean? So that's all that I'm saying. Like I'm hoping that what I'm still seeing is an emphasis, especially with the Porzingis injury, that there's an emphasis to run those bodies out there just to buy yourself a little bit more time for what you're actually asking this team to sacrifice and do for the ultimate goal, which is to win the championship.
Yeah. So let me just, close with this. I think, we've talked a lot about being able to go home for the role players for Dallas. And I think if you're one thing to worry about for Boston is like, it's the antithesis of that. Now you're going on the road and those role players, those bench players haven't really done much. So at home. So now against a raucous crowd, what's it going to be? But you're 1,000% right. You got to have that middle relief, those minutes eaters, if you will. And that's what Pritchard and Hauser are doing right now. Incidentally, their combined plus minus was a +5 in this game, in 23 combined minutes. Derek Lively himself was a -15 in almost 20 minutes himself. So, Dallas's bench didn't look good. -15 from Lively, -10 from Josh Green, -6 from Jaden Hardy. He only played 2 minutes. So, and +4 for Dante Exum. He played 10 minutes. But those are some pretty significant minuses on the Dallas side. But again, I would expect those guys to play better. But it will be interesting to see, especially if if Porzingis is not 100%, is there a third bench guy that Mazzulla can turn to? And who will it be? Otherwise, we're going to see more Tatum at the 5 spot because, you need to give Al, some rest out there. And then I don't know how Tatum will hold up, on the offensive side if he's having to have to bang with Gafford and Lively on a regular basis. But Porzingis is the key, I think, to Boston's health and the efficiency offensively for the rest of the series.
We'll wait and see what kind of grin he gives during the next media session. I think that'll tell us. That'll give us all everything that we need to know.
Yes, sir.
Awesome show, Shaw. Great conversation and discussion. And again, I think for people who are paying attention and watching how this series is playing out, minus the big run that the Celtics had in Game 1, this is two pretty evenly matched teams, and it could have gone either way. Could have easily been a 1-1 or an 0-2, or as it is right now, as it stands, it's 2-0 with the Boston Celtics, taking care of home court. And that's what you're supposed to do. It's why you won as many games as you won in regular season. And if you're the Dallas Mavericks, this is why you're happy now to be bringing it back home. You have an opportunity where you can even this series out and you basically make it a new ball game. But if you're the Boston Celtics, anywhere within these next 2 games, you can easily put the Dallas Mavericks on their heels and literally put them on the precipice of being eliminated so that you can actually win the championship. And I think this is just, great must see and hear and watch, what I'm saying, as it pertains to the finals scenarios being played out.
Yeah, the numbers say 31-5. When a team goes up 2-0 in the NBA Finals, I would not count this Dallas team out yet. But right now, Boston has control of the series. 3-0 gives them command of the series. So we'll see if that actually kind of comes into play. But I know Dallas is going to be ready, especially going back home. And Luka's going to get some treatment on that knee. Kyrie, in essence, should be better. And those role players also what I expect. And I love what you said to kind of close. It's not even just about the points. It could be the energy. And Derek Lively is an energy guy. So if he's able to do some things, both on the offensive side and hitting a couple of shots, but blocking some shots, getting some assists.
And I think that, Shaw, I think that is the key. Listen, again, I don't want, we can have this for another conversation, maybe after we do the next coverage of the NBA Finals. But I think that is what's going to be necessary for the Dallas Mavericks. I know people want to be, maybe their offense is going to be their greatest, is going to be their equalizer of the defense, so to speak. But right now, the calling card for why the Boston Celtics are getting elevated and they're being, they're making these key defensive plays. They're making those crazy defensive plays that are just getting the fan bases up. You know what I'm saying? You get these dunks, like by Porzingis and Brown and things of that nature. The Dallas Mavericks need that signature moment. They need that galvanizing moment to happen. And I think if it happens in this Game 3, I think it could literally turn this series around with that opportunity in Game 4, makes it a lot more favorable for them to even out that series. But if the Celtics wind up having the same kind of impact like they did in these first 2 games where they get that signature moment, could be all she wrote.
Well, fans and listeners, let us know what you think here of the NBA Finals thus far. Boston Celtics up 2-0 as they head to the third game in Dallas on Wednesday. Should be a good one, regardless of how who you're rooting for. But we're excited here to continue to bring you coverage on the Baseline NBA podcast, brought to you by 19 Media Group, man. So I'm excited, brother. Let's see how this thing rolls out.
Absolutely. For the Baseline, Callie, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. You know we do. We'll catch up with you next time.